All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Cycle Jerks Podcast, episode 126. I'm your host, Mike Stewart, joined by the still gainfully unemployed Dave Dalton, sporting a big injury on his forehead. So, welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me know. Send me your email address. I'll send you my resume if you have cool jobs opening. or just sponsor the podcast and we can make a living doing this and life will be good.
Yeah, I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
Uh,
But we are really pleased to have Lori Lee Lown with us. And Lori founded Savvy Bike, and
Savvy Bike.
and also Velo Girls. And she's been fitting people and coaching people and helping them with their cycling experience since 2001, probably beyond that even, but officially since 2001. So very happy to have you on, Lori. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
Holy 2001. That's basically when I started riding.
Well, me too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I had a few years, but that tended to lend itself to developing my own career because I'd only been riding a bike for a few years when I decided to get paid to do it. So
yeah. It's funny how the bike works that way with a lot of people, where you have this experience and it's just like, oh, this is what I'm doing now,
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit, like, where did you grow up?
Sure. Not far from Dave Dalton, upstate New York.
Really?
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah.
So, well, I was born and raised in Elmira, and then I did my undergraduate work in Ithaca. And then I floated around the East Coast for a little bit. I worked in theater. So I was in DC, I was in Schenectady, and then I landed in Syracuse for 9 years.
No kidding.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
Right on.
And that's where I bought my first adult bike was in Syracuse. There was a bike shop on Erie Boulevard. I remember Erie Boulevard. I don't know, but it was a Specialized hard rock. And at the time, as I said, I worked in theater. So not the most healthy lifestyle in the world. I drank and I smoked and I wore black and decided I wanted to quit smoking. And I didn't like going to the gym. So I bought a bike thinking it would help me stop smoking. It didn't. Because what I realized is I was afraid of riding a bike, even though I rode a bike as a kid. I rode a bike right through college and then I had stopped. And as an adult, you have a lot more baggage, I think, and fear. So I bought a Specialized hard rock, which I think in the 90s was probably one of the first production mountain bikes. But at the time, we didn't ride them in the dirt, really. We rode on the road. It was just a different style of bike.
Right.
Yeah.
But you needed that in Syracuse for the other 9 months out of the year that there wasn't snow.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it was funny because when I lived in Syracuse, I did ride a little bit. I was a Girl Scout leader as well. And I had this great fantasy of taking the girls along the Erie Canal and, doing bike camping. And I bought all these packs and racks and things. And then I was afraid of riding the bike. And at one point I belonged to a ski club called Ski Hawks, which was a singles club. And I didn't ski, but I joined because it was a singles club. And they did all kinds of other activities, happy hours and volleyball. And I eventually did learn to ski and we skated. And one night at happy hour, I was talking to a couple of guys and they were like, yeah, we're going mountain biking on Sunday. And I'm like, that's great. I'm a mountain biker. I wasn't, I had one. And I remember
you were single, but you were single.
I was single. Single.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what a little bit of alcohol would do to you, right? You tell these great stories. And so I remember showing up somewhere, I think near Green Lakes. And they took the platform pedals off my bike and put toe cages on. And all I remember is being terrified and making it maybe half an hour and saying, could you just point me back to the car? I'll leave the pedals. And that was kind of it. I was like, I am not a mountain biker. And I'm sure it was something totally chill, but it was more experience than I had. So that was my beginning as an adult cyclist.
It's so funny. That's a flashback. When I first moved out here, I got in with this group and they used to mountain bike. And I was like, okay, what is that? And they're like, well, and so I went out and I convinced Sue. I had a road bike, but I convinced my wife and I bought a Trek 6500 or something like that, right? And I thought, this thing, like $600, this has got to be a good mountain bike, right?
Yeah.
And the first place they took me was Pleasanton Ridge, and I almost died going up this thing, and I thought I was in good shape, and I almost died. And then it's funny, I bring this up because you mentioned the toe cages. I thought that was the shit. Like, okay, I got toe cages, right? I'll be pulling up, pushing down. Well, try to remount. Like if you got his steep part, try to remount and get your big sneakers into a toe cage and keep going. So it was, yeah. So I kind of lived what you went through there. So
yeah,
it's funny. We kind of come a long way with mountain bikes, and a lot of guys now, guys and gals that mountain bike ride flat pedals.
mm-hmm.
That's the very thing that they removed from from you just getting started. The toe clips definitely make it a lot more challenging off road. You know,
and on road if you want to, you know, destroy a knee when you crash and you don't unclip. That's the way to go. So,
yeah.
No, but it was interesting. I went mountain biking at Santa Cruz at UC on Saturday, and I was with 3 other girls, and they were all on flats. And I throw them on when I want to work on skills, but I learned to ride with clipless pedals on the road, and I'm much more comfortable on the mountain bike as well. So,
same. I'm the same. Yeah. Well, okay.
Before
So
we go
you're
too deep, tell us about your experience in. Wait, hold on. Before we go too deep, tell us about your experience in theater. That's an interesting start. Yeah,
it is. Well, it starts before that. I was a musician. I played oboe was my major, but I played all the woodwinds, keyboards, mallets. I sang, I composed, and interestingly enough, I had some performance anxiety that started around my senior year in high school, and my dad, it was a big priority. I grew up in a pretty small, povertous town, and a big priority that we went to college, but he couldn't afford to send us to college. He was a foreman in a factory. So I had to get a scholarship, and got a full music scholarship to Ithaca College. And then I also got into Eastman and Juilliard, which are conservatories, and they don't give you any money to start. And so Ithaca was it. And I was in a performance and education program. And at the time I thought, I never want to teach. Teaching is just awful. I'm somewhat introverted. And ironically, I've taught my whole career in a variety of different ways. I taught at Syracuse University. I taught for Girl Scouts, the Red Cross, Charles Schwab when I was there. I teach now. So, but at the time at 18, I thought I didn't want to teach. And I was worried about the performance piece. As an oboist, there aren't very many professional oboists in the world. And so I started building this degree program, a bachelor's of music with an outside field of business, thinking, well, I can fall back on that and manage a symphony or an opera or whatever. And then through that program, I found a theater management program. So I ended up with a BFA in theater management from Ithaca. And that's what I did for 14 years. And lived in DC for a while. I started my career with an internship at the Kennedy Center, and I worked at all the big theaters there, the Folger and Arena Stage, did a kids tour, which was great fun. And then I had a very short stint at a PBS station. I was working at a theater that was a historical drama, and it was filmed for PBS, and they wanted to hire me to do post-production. So I worked there, and it was terribly boring, and ended up back in Syracuse for 9 years at Syracuse Stage. I was the business manager there, and then I taught in the theater department, the drama department for the university. And and that's what brought me to California, actually. I got a gig at San Jose Rep. I was looking for a job, and I was finishing up my MBA, and I got an offer from Yale Rep in New Haven, Connecticut, and an offer from San Jose Rep. And I was like, wait a minute, New Haven, sunny California, New Haven. So I ended up here, even though I knew that theater was bankrupt and they were not bound to last for long. And I think I made it 6 months, and I gave my notice, and then they gave me a big, huge raise, which is ironic because we were bouncing paychecks, but they gave me a raise anyways. And I stayed for another 6 months, and then made a quick foray into a startup, and then was at Charles Schwab for a couple of years. So.
Well, it's very obvious you're introverted, so I can see that.
I am.
Yeah, right.
I'm introverted and I'm shy, but I'm okay with like one-on-one or one-on-two. I'm okay with that. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know here. So we're talking about oboe, theater, master's degree, Charles Schwab, television, and
I forgot singing too. I mean, she was a singer. Right.
And all Mike and I do are ride bikes. I'm feeling kind of insignificant here.
We're tunnel vision, the two of us.
Did you both start out in the bike industry? That was your first and last and only career?
So 13. I started working at the
Wow.
bike shop. I was racing BMX, and I didn't get a paycheck for the longest time because I just wanted parts, you
Parts.
know? Yeah. So I've been around bikes. I left a little bit, did some stuff, but yeah, it was very short lived, and I came back, and I've been here ever since. So I love the bike business, you know?
No, I dreamed about it for a long time, but I didn't really get into it till 2014, which is how I met Mike.
Yeah.
When I opened my own shop, but dreamed about it for a long time until we finally got the thumbs up from my wife to say go ahead. So
how do you make $1 million in the bike industry?
Yeah, exactly.
Start with 2 million.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's so true. It's a labor of love for sure. There are people that are successful doing it, but it's a very challenging space. There's a lot of
well, especially now. It's been a very interesting few years.
Yes, it has.
So we'll see how it all shuffles out, but not for the weak.
That's right.
I wouldn't discourage anyone from doing it. I mean, I'm broke, which sucks, but
he didn't start with 2 million.
Yeah. So believe me. But it was, it was a phenomenal experience. It opened up so much. I think I'm a better businessman for it. And then, we had Chris Padavana from Eden
I know.
last week, and what a success story that is. Like, that was, I remember, this isn't about me, but I remember like our last chunk of savings and someone saying, don't do it, Dave, don't do it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, I can save this, because I could just think of Padavana, like, this guy has built the business. This is it. I can do it. Didn't work out, but whatever, there's enough. I would never dissuade anyone from trying it. Right. I mean, well, Lori, every business is hard.
Yeah, well, bicycle retail is one thing, but you've created like a different kind of niche that is, I think, probably a lot more sustainable in terms of market fluctuation, right? Because the bike shops kind of go through these waves where during COVID, it was bananas, super busy. And then now it's like the crash and there's nothing. Whereas as someone who does fits and you're more experiential based your business with the coaching and the tours and whatnot and the rides. So do you find that you on a pretty steady trajectory in that regard, or do you have peaks and valleys as well?
Yes. So, well, I mean, one other thing that you may not know about me is a lot of people who work as coaches also do other things. So I repped Pactimo for 10 years. I've worked at, I was at Summit for 4 years when I first started my career. I was at Kalmar for a while. I was at Roaring Mouse. So I've been in the retail side as well. I worked for touring companies. I worked for Seattle for a couple of years when I wanted to launch women's programs, and I ran some camps for them as well. So when you work in the bike industry as an independent, I think you hustle. And that's my best advice to anyone who is a small business owner, especially a service-oriented business, is don't put all your eggs in one basket. So yes, I own my own businesses, but I also do other things for other people. And I don't ever want to get too far away from the core things that I do as well. So maybe like I fit virtually right now, as well as in person. I work for one of the Peloton coaches in his coaching company, but that's not all I do. And I'm not going to rely on just that because I want to keep my hands in the physical side of things. I want to keep my own business sustainable. And I think if you find the right mix of things that you do, then when you have ebbs on one side, you have flows on the other. And I think that's super important as a business person, is being able to kind of roll with whatever the industry does. But as a fitter, it was super crazy. I mean, in 2020, and luckily I used to stock up all my inventory, saddles and bars and stems and all that stuff at the beginning of the year. And so I went into 2020 really well stocked with stuff. But by, middle of the year, I couldn't buy saddles. I couldn't buy footbeds. I couldn't find stems. I couldn't get seat posts, and I was booked out for 6 months. At that point, I was fitting, 40 to 60 hours a week once we were allowed to open again.
Wow.
And it was kind of crazy. And I have, I'm not young like you guys. I'm 58. And well, I know one of you is my age and one of you is a little older. So, Right. And so what I've tried to do is kind of balance out the physical work with the non-physical work, because the other component working in the bike industry is my own training.
Yeah.
And for years, I let that go. I put my business first because I was, worried about making enough money to eat and pay rent. And so I would work more and train less. And just in the last, I don't know, maybe 6, 7, 8 years, I've really tried to make myself a priority too, because I know you got to walk the talk. You gotta, and if I'm not training, my brain isn't quite as awesome. I will say that, right? So training is part of my mental health as well. And so balancing that all out, doing our physical training, doing the physical work, and then also doing the non-physical work, which I think makes a good mix. But I've been fortunate. I mean, I'm contracted with a number of different clubs and teams to teach their skills clinics for them. And I have a staff that works for me that also teaches. And so it's good.
How'd you make this? So, and I think you mentioned something like my recommendation for, any person starting their business, but I think it starts with like, how did you make that transition? So yes, you have this beater bike that you bought in Syracuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you're working in the theater and that goes bankrupt. And then suddenly now you're all about the bike. Like, how'd that transition happen, and how did you get into it and start to follow it?
There were a couple steps in between. So I left theater. I worked for a startup. I was there for 4 months and I got laid off. First time in my life I'd ever been unemployed, going from a career in theater, which you would think would be risky. Yeah. And then
you must have sucked at what you do, because you're the first person I've ever heard that got laid off from a startup.
Yeah.
So that's
yes, right. Yeah. I know. And I was the person that wrote payroll. It's another story. Anyways, then I went to Charles Schwab. So I had just bought a house. I was a little gun shy. I went to 13 interviews, got all these offers, and Charles Schwab just seemed like a good fit. It was a very creative, diverse company, very much like the not-for-profit theater world that I was in. And was there through Y2K, which was a big deal in the finance industry, and anyone who was using technology. If you remember, Charles Schwab had hired 9,000 employees and contractors in anticipation of basically the world falling apart. We called it Millennium Force. And I remember the entire company was trained to come in on New Year's Day in 2000 and answer the phone just to give basic position information, because we all thought all the banking systems would fail, all the systems, computer systems would fail. And it became a non-issue. Everybody had done the work. And so then they laid off 9,000 people about a year later. And at that point, I had started riding a bike. I got a proper road bike. I got the Trek 5200. And side note, a frame size too large for me, which kind of led me down the path where I ended up. But that's what the bike shop had, and they sold it to me. So anyways, I fell in love with riding a bike. I completed the California AIDS ride. It really was my foray into cycling. And it was the first time.
What year did you do that?
Multiple years. But the first time in 2000.
My wife and I did it in 99 and 2001, I think.
Oh, cool. I did it in 2001 as well. We probably camped.
Oh, that was you. That was you.
Yeah, that was me. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Anyways, long story short, I decided to get healthy when I moved to California, and this was part of it. And to quit smoking, eventually quit drinking, and became fit, like everyone here who was, fit and rich and beautiful and all those things. So I did the California ride, fell in love with riding, went on this month-long tour to New Zealand and Australia and rode there. And when I came back, they had the layoffs at Schwab, and they laid off, this was in 2001, they laid off 9,000 people. And I was one, which was surprising. We just won this huge award from Charles Schwab himself. But anyways, I was like, I've got 11 months severance. I've got money to go to school. I don't have to worry about getting a job. 6 months prior, I'd been, contacted by headhunters almost every day trying to recruit me away. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to chill and ride bikes all summer. And I did. And then when I started looking for a job, there was nothing. No one was hiring. And at that point I had been project managing, and that's what I wanted to do. And there were no projects because there was no money. And, the whole Silicon Valley just imploded basically. And I had this
Yep.
educational money, so I went back to school. I found a program at Foothill that was a personal fitness training program, the California certificate, which is like half an associate's degree. And then I also studied adaptive fitness, so fitness for folks with disabilities, and decided wasn't sure what I wanted to do with it, but I knew I didn't want to be a trainer because I can't count to 10 without losing my place. So I can't count reps, and decided the bike had been, instrumental in changing my life. I wanted to share that with people. And the other thing I had noticed in cycling was there weren't a lot of women. I mean, they were out there. I knew they were there. I'd done Cinderella. I saw them, 2,500 of them.
Right.
But they didn't ride together. And you would see a big group of guys and there'd be like one woman hanging on to try to stay with them. And I didn't ride with women. I was fast and I rode mostly with guys. And I was like, okay, there's a niche here of something that I can do to bring women together to ride bikes. And interesting side note, my MBA from Syracuse is in gender relations. So I'd spent a lot of time studying how we're different and how we behave and learn and how we form communities differently and all of that. So
there's actually a degree in gender.
Yes. Well,
there's
it wasn't
probably
a
a
degree.
bunch of them now.
Now there probably are.
Yeah,
It was a concentration. So it was a general management MBA with a concentration in gender relations. Yeah.
Wow.
I think we had to read Venus and Mars, the gray book. And
yeah.
Wow.
Well, as a retailer, I know that we always tried to be very accommodating and excited about the women's opportunity, but it was just a bunch of young dudes in the bike shop, and so there was like this relatability thing that I just wasn't happening. And we ended up hiring this gal that was a customer of ours, and two things happened that were really fantastic. The first thing that happened was all the frat boy humor in the shop ended. So that was nice because I was the manager at this stage of the game, and I would always be telling them like, hey, you can't say stuff like that. You can't, there's people, if that was someone to hear that, it's not acceptable, but I was young also. So I wasn't I wasn't a great manager, I would say. I was just a young person put in the management role, doing the best I could. And
the only one who wasn't going to steal from the bike shop, right? So they made you
that's right. I wasn't going to steal. and I could tell somebody, hey, stop doing that. All right. You need to be doing this. I could do that, but we hired this gal, and she cleaned up all the frat boy humor. And then all of a sudden we started selling bikes to women, and it was unreal. And I was doing fits at the time. And so she didn't have that expertise. So, but it was just so nice getting this infusion of women and then getting women on bikes. And I saw the potential. This is, way back. I've been a sales rep for 30 years. So how long ago was that? But still, the ratio is much better today than it was back then. But we still got
it's still skewed. I mean,
way to go. Yeah.
I can say I've been the only woman at almost every place I've worked. Yeah. And that's, and we know that when we look at racing, women make up 13% of the race licenses in the US. And of those, a lot of them are not active. That's the other interesting fact there. Big events, things like the Death Ride, Triple Bypass, the big long events, 15% women. Even events like the AIDS Ride, which are multi-day events, are very low in the percentage. I'll share with you my first bike shop experience. So I went to work for the bike shop that sold me the bike that was too big. And their bookkeeper had walked out. They were a Trek shop, and I came in and they hadn't paid bills in ever. The CFO of Trek came in and told us, okay, you're going to get rid of one highly compensated employee. You had two, and you're going to make a payment plan. And, it was serious business at this point. But the bathroom was a closet. It had cold water. It had leaky toilet. The floor was always wet. It was also the dressing room. There was a Miss Vaquita poster on the wall, and there was a door that didn't have a lock on it. Yeah. And it was like, why is that an afterthought in a retail establishment where you're trying to bring women in? Right. I was on a panel at Interbike years ago as part of the Nature Valley Grand Prix Women's Initiative, and it was a retailer panel of how do we make retail spaces more comfortable for women. And I know Trek teaches about the brush butt or the butt brush and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You have to create a space that a woman feels comfortable in, and
Yes.
you know, not make her walk through an entire store that's full of gadgets and techie things to get to, you know, the 3 blue jerseys in the back corner or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to have
Right.
a welcoming space. And unfortunately, I think part of that too is the demographic of our sales staff typically are the groms, right? The 16-year-old boys who aren't comfortable talking to 16-year-old girls, never mind middle-aged women.
Yep.
So it's definitely a challenge. And I know the big retailers do spend some time trying to educate at least their management staff about that. And hopefully that trickles down, but it's a hard environment. And especially now with online retailing, for a lot of women, they would rather just shop online and find what they can get instead of going into a bike shop, because it can be an intimidating space to be in.
Yeah, but it's interesting, you know, because I think Giant and Live do a really good job. I mean, that to qualify to be Live certified, you know, you had to have certain things. And from day one, Mike and the management team was always like, okay, women. But to your point, you know, as much as that small percentage of that 15 or 13% that are active rider, I mean, I proactively tried to hire women, and you could, because there were fewer riders, you couldn't get women to work in the shop, and it was frustrating. There was a concerted effort to do it, and we did have 1 or 2 false starts, but it was harder to find, and no shortage. Like I like a high school kid, right? You could easily go to the high school mountain bike team, and one of the boys would go, "Yeah, I'll work for you." You couldn't go to the high school mountain bike team and find a woman that wanted to work for you. It was just I don't know why that is. So,
and there are challenges finding girls for the teams. So I've coached 2 different teams in the high school league. I coached the very first composite team in the league back in 2005. It was in Burlingame, so it was a peninsula team.
Yep.
And we had 5 boys. And they're all BMX riders, so we had to teach them how to ride. And 1 girl who was the daughter of a bike shop owner, and she came to 1 meeting and she was done. It wasn't her thing. And then we had another team in 2015 I worked with, the Woodside Beasts, which was also a composite team. And again, 1 girl, she was the daughter of a male racer who was a master's racer. And you know, you have requirements on these teams that if you don't even have that many girls, you can't compete as the team competition, and you just can't recruit them. Whereas you'll find teams like Berkeley where you get a couple of the girls involved and then they bring their friends along. So it is hard, you know, and NorCal now has some great initiatives like Grit, which are bringing girls into the sport and trying to, but you know, it's always been exactly.
Way to go.
Yeah.
So why do you think that is? I mean, and if you can answer this, then we'll move right on to world hunger, and you can maybe solve that. But I mean, there's a really good example. The Cinderella ride, like it's massive, all women, but it's a lot of them. Unfortunately, they come out for that event, they do it, but then they don't. There's not that continuation, and it's a shame. I don't know.
I think you need a champion. I think that's what it comes down to. I mean, I started our racing team, our first year of Velo Girls with 40 women. And it was also at a time when there were larger teams of women racing. And I think you need someone who is going to dedicate themselves to making it happen, or be able to motivate other people to help them make it happen. And unfortunately, eventually you're going to stop doing that. There are very few people like me that continue to do the same darn thing for 22 years. Either I'm stupid or I'm brilliant.
Yeah.
So, right.
Let's go with the latter.
Exactly. But even what I do has changed. I mean, we had a racing team for 12 years. I had a development program, one of the first development programs in the United States that was not for kids. And we were, but you know, in the racing scene, you're recruiting, you're training, you're developing, and then eventually women are either going to continue racing at another level and go to a different team potentially, or they're going to stop racing altogether. And I think that's what we see. Women have many more distractions in their lives. A woman gives birth, she doesn't go out that afternoon and race a crit. a man's wife gives birth and he goes out that afternoon
Right.
and races.
Yeah.
So it's
Guilty.
right.
Yeah.
So
Well,
women, you know, we have distractions that keep us away from the sport. And I think women also start the sport later, which has a very different trajectory for many of them.
yeah.
And you know, we have degrees and relationships and children and that kind of thing that stops us. We tend to put everybody else first. And I think that's a big gender difference in how we treat it, right? A guy can sneak away and get a hall pass. A woman's a bad mom if she doesn't go to the soccer game on Saturday morning and instead goes to a training ride or a race.
I'm embarrassed to say that's true. I'm embarrassed to say it's true. Yeah.
But I will say, back to the volume of women, the women are out there. I mean, if you look at the MBDA numbers, it's about 50-50, although women spend less money on the initial bike purchase. Men will buy the $10,000 bike as a newbie. Yeah. Whereas a woman will buy the $2,500 bike, which used to be the really expensive bike, right? My first bike was $2,500. It was like top of the line.
Yeah. But
women, you know, buy more shoes, buy more clothing, buy more helmets. It's they'll buy more accessories. So I think dollar wise, it's probably pretty equivalent, but numbers wise, as far as individuals, it's pretty close. But women don't ride as often, women don't race and do the harder events as often. And some do, some seek it out, some don't. So
well, my hat's off to you and some of our other guests. Melanie Wong is a big champion. Helena from Monarch Racing. That's what that's all about. And then obviously Vanessa from NorCal League. I mean, I love to see, you know, their passion and their commitment to that, bringing women into the sport.
I think what's interesting too, though, is, like I said, the kind of the legacy where you have these big men's clubs and someone will keep it going. Whereas with the women's clubs, I don't know if women don't feel empowered. I met Anna Schwinn a number of years ago. I was I rode from Rochester to Minneapolis, and she took me to this crazy diner for breakfast. This was like donuts with eggs and all these crazy things. Anyways, fascinating woman. Obviously, if you know the bike world, you know that she is the legacy of the Schwinn family, but she's made an amazing name for herself as a bike designer. She just developed all the all city bikes and worked for QBP, and really cool woman, and a little on the political side, which is good too. And she taught me a term I didn't know, which was erasure. And when we look at history, how we forget about certain things, and she didn't know who I was. And I've been doing this for 20 years here in my own little circle. And I always think of myself as like the most famous person no one knows, because I've kind of kept what I do locally versus people like Nicola, who, you know, has created a global team or that kind of thing. And I think what we're seeing with people like Helen, with all these new teams that start, is, again, none of this is new. We've been doing it in our own little way, and it starts and it ends, and it starts and it ends, and then somebody else does it, and somebody else does it. And I think the question for me is, why can't we continue it? Why do we start from scratch all the time? Why does somebody have to develop this new team and find new sponsors and do this new thing that no one's ever done, that everybody's been doing, if that makes sense?
Right.
So we don't see that as much on the men's side. And maybe it's because we start these women's teams that are smaller. We're not starting clubs, basically. We're starting, you know, an elite team with 6 women.
Yeah.
So, or 8 women or whatever.
Well, I think finally, you know, on the world stage, we're starting to see hopefully what will become legacy type of events, where they're doing the Tour, they're doing the Roubaix, they're doing the, you know, the Giro, and for the first time they're actually getting really legitimate coverage, which is nice. It's not the same as the men's coverage, but it is being covered. And so that's a big breakthrough, and could serve as inspiration around the world for more women to ride bikes. And I do see, you know, I've been in the bike industry since I was 13, you know, so I've seen so much growth and development addressing training employees to make their shop, or shop owners and employees, but basically make their shop more woman friendly, and how to set up your store so it's more inviting to women. And sometimes it can come off, the training can come off a little bit like a little condescending almost, or where it's like, this is common sense, but it's really, I mean, it needs to be said to a lot of these young people that are in these stores, because they're just young people and they're nervous about all kinds of different things, let alone talking to a grown woman about a bicycle.
Right.
So the training is there, where like when I was a young store manager, I had no training. There was no resource. The internet wasn't even a thing. And so, that's how long ago it was. And so I was just kind of flying blind, but knowing that we were just not, we did something. There was a book called The 10-Minute Manager. I read that book. So that was my whole game plan. But one of the things that I picked up was
about his attention span.
Yeah, about 10 minutes. Yeah. But was tracking sales. And so I started this thing where I was tracking sales. I was tracking people coming through the door, tracking how many legitimate engagements are we having about bicycles, and then how many were we selling. So there was like a close ratio, and then I broke it up by men and women. And the thing was, we were not closing women at all. And in our shop down the street, there was a fantastic retailer, Livermore Cyclery, and it was a husband and wife team. Steve and Melinda Howard were fantastic retailers, and they had, not only was Melinda there, but also Anne was a sister. She was there, so they had 2 women on staff all the time. So we were getting smashed by Livermore Cyclery, and I'm not going to say just because they had women, but I think that's a huge part of the decision process, right? And I find myself doing this too, mainly because my history, I think, of tracking sales and just being in sales. But I know, like, when I go somewhere to buy something, and if I get a younger person or I can go with anybody, but if I find somebody that's kind of my age, it's like, it's so easy just to just hit all the notes with somebody that's kind of your own age, your own gender, or what have you. And so, so anyway, I was having a hard time, but I've seen a lot of growth there. And then also on the racing and the club rides, you see growth there too. I did the Cinderella ride as a support, as a young kid. So it's like, hey, you want to go, this is a women's ride, and I'm just young and single. I'm like, oh yeah, I want to do that. Are you kidding me? I get to be the hero. And
back in the day when the volunteers still dressed up like princes.
Yeah.
They don't do that anymore.
No, I didn't do that. I didn't. So I missed that.
You didn't wear tights. Okay.
There were people that were doing it, but I was I think it was in the transitional phase where some people were still doing it, some people weren't. But anyway, and so it was great. But a lot of those women, though, to Dave's point, it was like a one time a year they'd ride a bike or whatever.
Yeah, that's their big event.
And I think too, like the distracted driving, I think really impacts. There's a lot more coverage about people getting injured and stuff. And like one of my buddies, he goes to 24-hour fitness and he does a spin class, and so he talked me into going. And so I went. I wanted to experience it, and it was almost all women in the spin class. So there's definitely the activity is not really the thought of putting in an hour of work on a bicycle is not what's the deterrent. I think it's the environment, maybe the safety of it. He knew the coach or the leader, whatever they call the instructor. Yeah. So we stood around afterwards and we were talking, and I was asking her about it, and she was saying that, oh yeah, most of these women don't want to be, they have no interest in riding a road bike. And I was just like, man, and it is a different experience, but there's so much more to be had outside. Yeah.
It's not just about fitness. It's about seeing and smelling and hearing and touching and all those things. But it is true. Women, I think in general, have much greater sense of responsibility for other people.
Yes.
Whereas, I have the family to take care of. I have the job to go to. If I can't drive, and I think that's in the back of their mind, there's definitely a perception of safety in numbers. Like we run through Velo Girls, we run progressive series throughout the year. Cinderella is one of them. And we usually get about 100 women who participate in that series that train and participate in the event together. And they like to be part of this community. They like to do it together. They build friendships. And as you know, when you start riding a bike, seriously, your social life becomes your bike rides, your Saturday mornings, not your Friday nights. You don't go out and drink on Friday night because you're going to get up and ride your bike in the morning. And so that's their social life. We have coffee stops and we have lunch afterwards and that kind of thing. But their classes in particular, women are joiners. Women like to participate in a class and have a schedule. And it's funny because my ex used to say, why do you always hire a trainer? Or why do you go to this fitness class? And I'm like, because I don't want to think about it. I would rather have someone else guide me. It's one less thing for me to think about. Maybe I'm not unbiased about where I should be doing things and how I should be doing things. So, but women are like that, whereas men will, set up a gym in their house and do it there. Although I think the pandemic has changed a lot of that as well. I mean, I think we're seeing people staying at home for fitness. I ride my Peloton a few days a week because it's easy. And it's a great workout, and I can do power-based training with an actual power meter that's similar to the power meters on my bikes outside, and it doesn't take all day, and I don't have to contend with cars and mountain lions and rattlesnakes and tarantulas and poison oak and all the other things, right? So
tell us about so here we are saying that why aren't they, and we're speculating, but tell us about Velo Girls, if that's a way that so our audience can hear this and say, here's an avenue into it. Tell me how that works.
So when I started the club, it was definitely, I saw this need, and I had a coach at the time, a male coach, who actually, he was like, who would ever want to come race for you or ride with you? You're just a recreational rider who never raced a bike. And I was like, okay, you're not going to be my coach for much longer. But, and he kept pushing me to, I know, I lived in Burlingame at the time, and he kept pushing me to, ride with Penn Velo or Alta Velo or whatever. And there were no women. And I wanted a women's environment as well. And I also wanted an avenue to coach. Back in the early 2000s, USA Cycling, which had been USCF, was the coach structure was club coach. And when you start with that, they have this whole development structure. And I think it was really geared toward juniors, but like, here are the skills you should develop. And back in the day, clubs were sponsored. And if you didn't put on a bike race, you couldn't have your sponsorship. And the other thing was, you didn't just buy a jersey and go out and start racing. Your club really had a formal structure, and they were going to make sure you weren't going to crash people out. So it was a very different world than now, where, you just pay your $60 or whatever the license is these days, and you pin on a number and go race. So there was a sense of safety and a lot more skill education. And I was like, well, why can't I just do that with a bunch of women? I wanted to race my bike, hadn't found the right match with the team. And so I built a website and started a club. And we started kind of small with just 2 rides a month. And it really grew very quickly from there. There was no social media at the time. And, so we advertised on Craigslist, and I took flyers to all the local bike shops. And the bike shops were super excited about it because, they had something they could tell their female customers, hey, here's this club for you, and announced the first ride. I think it was on Craigslist actually. And we had like 60 women show up for their very first ride, and it was crazy. And we started doing 3 levels every week. So we had like a beginner level and a moderate level and an advanced level. And prior to that, by the way, I had been a ride leader for the AIDS ride. So I had gained some experience that way. But we were still, mapping routes on topo software. We didn't have ride with GPS or anything. We all had paper turn sheets, and I would drive routes to make sure they were safe and that kind of thing. So, and then we started some beginner clinics, and they were free. And it was just a morning clinic where we kind of combined some bike handling skills and some bike maintenance, the things that, women are afraid, oh, what if I get a flat and I don't know how to change it, or something's wrong with my bike? And so teaching what I thought were the fundamentals to prepare you to go out and ride a bike. And we quickly had a really large team of volunteers who wanted to lead and who wanted to help teach, and kind of grew from there. And within a few months, we had a racing team. And a few months later, we started mountain biking, even though I said we never would, because I didn't want to impinge on Jackie Fallon at the time, who, was the Wombats founder and had her thing going. But at that point, she had already started reducing what she did. So we've had many iterations over the years. We've always had a recreational club. And at one point we were doing rides almost every day of the year. We had lots of ride leaders, and we had a racing team for 12 years. We had a pro team that competed on the national calendar for a year.
Wow.
What else have we done? A lot of things. We were recognized by USA Cycling for many years as being the Women's Club of the Year, and one of the first in the United States. When I started Velo Girls, there was Left Coast Cyclery sponsored a women's masters team that had been kind of a pull off from Valley Spokesman. So they were all experienced women. They did not allow beginner racers. And Linda Jackson had just started the Palo Alto Bicycles women's team, which eventually became TIPCO, and sadly is now retiring this year after all those years. Their team is going to shut down. Wow. But that was it. And then there was one group of women who would train for the AIDS ride each year in San Francisco. And there wasn't much else. And I wanted to create something that was sustainable. So we weren't focused just on an event like the AIDS ride. I wanted something year round. I wanted something that wasn't tied into fundraising, because that can be a deterrent for people. And I just wanted to challenge people. We did all kinds of fun things in a supportive way. So a little different than you might see where you show up on the hop ride and good luck. I hope you know the shortcuts, because you're going to get dropped, and maybe you come back the next week and can hang. So and I also believe cycling shouldn't be dangerous. I mean, that's the key component. I do two things. So I fit and I teach skills, and I don't believe you have to crash your bike. Statistically, you don't have to crash your bike. And unfortunately, we have this attitude in the sport that there are those who will and those who have, being part of the collarbone club, knock on wood, I'm not in that club, which is good after 25 years of riding, right?
Yes.
But seriously, we don't have to crash. But most of us don't learn to ride our bikes. We just did it as kids. And we think, well, we know how to do it, but we don't know how to do it. We don't know the physics behind it. So at the time, there was no curriculum through any sanctioning body. So I developed my own curriculum based on kind of the physics of the bike. We don't roll around and pick up bottles on the ground. There's no use in that. We do other things, like really understand how the bike works and how to work with it and what causes us to crash, which really is only two things, right? Braking improperly and trying to steer with the bar. Everything else is good.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
it is interesting, because you can definitely live a life as a cyclist and not crash, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. I think the thing is, as someone who crashes quite a bit, I actually don't crash quite a bit, but when I ride the mountain bike, though, I tend to crash because I end up riding. I have the history of riding a certain way when I was younger. I had this BMX, and then I raced downhill. And so the mind still has this weird thing. And I've been really good about not engaging that. But I have a son who's 28, and he rides very aggressively on trails that I don't even think are really trails. I mean, they're just straight down the mountain.
Bushwick.
It's insane.
We did one this Saturday. It's called Poop Shoot, and it literally was straight down. Nobody rode it. We had and it was wet, and so it was like slippery, and I'm in my stiff sole shoes. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, but I don't get it at all. And so I've kind of like taken that mountain bike out of the quiver, and I ride a gravel bike, because I can still ride a lot of off-road trails that are mountain bike trails.
Yeah.
I don't have the big squishy forgiving suspension and tires. And so you have to go much slower. which works because I can't see anymore. I don't hear as well. You know what I mean? It's like the whole thing's falling apart.
Shoot him.
Yeah, I'm trying to do the best I can.
Take him out of his misery.
And for the record, he's the younger one of the two of us. So
okay.
Yeah, but it's hard, there's like ego, if you've done certain things, my son sometimes will say to me, he's like, Dad, you've done stuff twice this big. I'm like, I did. You're right. And I love writing too much. I'm not going to do it, So
the aging process is interesting though, because what are the cognitive changes that we see? Like you said, vision.
Yeah.
And it's not just that our vision change. Like I can't read anymore, so I wear one contact, which affects your depth perception, right? So I read with one eye, I see depth, and it doesn't bother me on the road at all. On the mountain bike, definitely, it changes things. The amount of time it takes for my eyes to recognize something and then my brain to figure out what's going on, like that change between shadow and sun.
Right.
Our response time, as we know, and we know this from the driving world, our response time is different. And so it's funny. I think about this a lot. I love descending. I've on the road. Too. I've broken 64 times in my career. I've broken 50 regularly. I don't seek it out anymore. Because I know the penalty's higher. And I always think about that. I'm like, at what point do you start to slow down? Mm-hmm. And I think it's starting at 58. I'm like, yeah, I don't do blind turns quite the way I used to.
Yeah.
Like I used to, right? I didn't care. No, it's not that I didn't care, but I'm like, maybe your number's coming off at some point. Maybe you should pay a little more attention to this.
Well, I call it wisdom.
Yeah, right.
I think you've seen a lot. You've experienced a lot. And you understand that, and you may not understand the exact relationship to hand-eye coordination, exactly how much different it is, but it's different. And so to think that you can still attain that level of, what do they call it? I don't give a, IGAF is what it is. You can't maintain that level. As you get older.
Wait, what is that? What's that saying?
I don't give a
fluff.
Yeah, fluff. Yeah. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah. So it is very interesting when we look at especially, I work with a lot of clubs and I live in Santa Cruz, and the Santa Cruz Club is not young. I'm very young compared to most of them. And I work with Valley Spokesman, I've worked with Western Wheelers, and a lot of our clubs are aging. And I think part of that also is social media. Meetup and Facebook make it very easy, Strava, for people to make a club, which is not really a sanctioned club or an insured club or anything, but it's a way to get people together. And there are good things about that. But I think younger folks are doing that versus a formal club structure. And I think there's a big difference, though, between being conservative and being afraid. And I think a lot of older riders start to become afraid. And it's okay to be conservative. We can make the choice to modulate our speed versus just being terrified of it. And when we're terrified, we make mistakes. That's a big thing. It's like when you ride your brakes the whole way down a hill, you're going to crash. There's no question, because you don't have traction. At some point, it's going to fail you. Versus learning how to modulate your speed and reduce your speed and let the bike accelerate again and be safe. So lots of changes as we age.
It's interesting you said that thing. My contacts are monovision, and I said this before. I said, I'm going to write a book about why I'll never win a gravel race. Right? It's going to be a really short book, and it's going to be because I can't fucking descend. Right? I just, excuse my language, but I can't. But I always thought it was conservative. But you just mentioned some stuff like, as I've aged, I don't see those transitions in dark and light. I don't see that rut as quickly as I do. And certain things just tend to freak me out. And just when I start to get that rhythm, I've never been a great descender, but it's gotten worse, really.
Yeah. Well, and I think, did you come from a road background or a mountain bike?
Mostly.
I think roadies who have never, everyone always jokes with me. I am not a super skilled mountain biker. I'm not super technical, although I raced cross country for years and I did lots of, 8-hour races and 24-hour races, but I'm a roadie who owns a mountain bike. And the skill set is the same. There's no question. The physics of the bike are the same. It's the terrain that's different. It's, on the mountain bike, it's looser, it's varied, it's steeper.
Yeah.
And so you have to be much more precise with the same skill set. And yes, there's slight differences, but in general, I think the skill set is the same. But yeah, I'm definitely one of those conservative people on the dirt. You wouldn't know it when you watch me on the road. So it's a slightly different experience.
And Mike says he's conservative or gotten conservative. Two of my worst crashes off-road have been following him down the trail. So.
Well, that's very bad. So one of the things people will always say is, "Oh, I'm a good descender, follow me." And I'm like, that's the worst advice ever, because you are no longer the pilot. You need to be the pilot on your bike, not the passenger. And when you follow someone else, you don't know their thought process. You don't know why they're choosing the line they're choosing. And much better would be have that person follow you and they can yell some advice to you. But yeah, that's usually a dangerous situation.
Yeah. Well, okay. I've never told Dave to like, hey, follow me.
He just does.
Yeah. But there is a thing in the downhill world though. Like if you hit if you're an accomplished rider and like this happened to me in first time I go to Whistler. So I've been racing downhill for years, and my son and I, we get up on this lift, we're riding across this thing, and these trails are like legendary trails. You've seen them in videos and movies or whatever all these years. And so we're all excited to go hit Dirt Merchant to A-Line. That's so, but we've only ever seen it on video. And this guy says, there's the thing they call a squirrel catcher. So at the very beginning, there's this very committed thing that you have to do. And if you're not committed, you're going to pay the price. And so we're on the chairlift and the guy says, he's like, oh man, and I said, oh yeah, it's our first time here. And he goes, oh man. And he goes, you're going right to Dirt Merch? I go, yeah, we race downhill, And he's like, oh, okay. He's like, follow me. So we get off the thing and we follow him. And as we go into Dirt Merch, my son's in front of me. And I decided, like, I don't know this person. I'm having these thoughts, like, I don't know this person. So I kind of brake check a little bit on the squirrel catcher. Yeah. And I go down like I bruised my leg. My whole thigh was purple for the entire week we were in Whistler. But my son followed him, didn't think twice, just followed him. And it completely worked out. Right. So yeah, there's kind of like
commitment.
There's even a movie, I think there is a movie, Follow Me. And it's kind of like the downhill mantra anyway, but I agree with you though, in general,
and I think frequency is important too.
Yes.
I just dusted off my mountain bike after a couple of years for whatever reason, because if I ride alone, I usually choose my gravel bike because then I can ride everything.
Yep.
And if I ride with others who are on road bikes, I ride road bikes. And the mountain bike, I haven't found my community over here in Santa Cruz. I know of all places, there's tons of community, but anyways, it just didn't happen. And I spent the last few years doing a lot of running too, which also limited my bike time. And so I've been on the mountain bike twice now in the last month. And I was like, yeah, when you ride your mountain bike frequently, a couple times a week, your skill set, boom, goes up because you understand how the bike feels versus you get on once in a while. But it's true for the road bike too. When you look at people who are very recreational riders and they get on once a week or once every other week or whatever, they're always going to feel somewhat uncomfortable, probably mentally more than physically, because it's kind of an awkward feeling for you if you don't do it often. And all of a sudden you hear the cars and you feel the cars and you feel the speed. Speed is a very interesting concept when you're, wearing stretchy clothes and you're on a bike that weighs a tenth of what you weigh. And so the more often we do something, the more confident we feel doing it. Imagine your first podcast, right? Or your first kiss or your first whatever. It was awkward, but the more you did it, the better it felt. So, yeah.
You just raised something very interesting that, the better way is to follow me, not follow me, but you lead and all. And I think we can relate that back to getting even women in sports or on the group ride. Because what happens, you assign a group leader, and what they do is they lead, right? So they don't stay behind and they don't coach people on, they lead. And next thing you know, they're going on, even on the road. You've got somewhat of a new rider and they're taking them on the road that they want to go to, and they want that climb that the person may not be comfortable with. And the ideal thing to do is get behind and coach them. This would be a time to shift gears. This would be a time, and we don't
have a lead and a sweep.
Yeah.
And that's what we always try to do, is have at least 2 ride leaders with each group. And typically you want to have more. If I have a lead and a sweep, the sweep often ends up with, the last rider the whole time. And so that one person gets lots of great coaching. But having someone who can work their way through a group, but we don't have a lot of learning organizations like that. I think that's the difference, is do we just have riding groups or do we have learning groups? And I think AIDS Life Cycle does a good job with that. Not that all their ride leaders are coaches, but at least their presence, and they have some experience and they can give some feedback. People don't realize, hey, you got 2 chain rings in the front, might want to use both of them because you paid for them, right? Or because people don't know simple things like how to shift or how to brake, and there's a lot of bad information out there. Even using both brakes. A lot of bike shops will tell people, oh, just use your rear brake because the front brake is dangerous. It can make you flip over the bike, right? But the rear brake can be equally as dangerous. It can make you slide out. So learning correct information. But that's the key, is having some coaching. And that's the one interesting thing I find is, we learn anything we learn as adults, we tend to practice. And in cycling, we don't do that. So if I were to learn a musical instrument or a language or whatever, I would practice. I wouldn't just jump in immersion, right? But in cycling, all we think about is how far can I go? How fast can I go? How high can I climb? We don't think about how precise we can ride. And I think that's a really important concept, right? I should learn skills, which most people don't do, and then I should practice them. It's not just about going out and riding. And in mountain biking, we do a little better. I might go back and session a section of a trail until I nail it. Whereas on the road bike, people just go out and go, and they want to see those stats. They don't want to practice things. And so learning how to do an emergency stop, how to counter steer, really what I think are probably the 2 most important skills we can learn, right? The fundamentals, and then practicing them. Don't just assume that you're going to be able to do them when you need to.
I was actually just looking at the clock as Mike, I think we just got our sound bite. I just thought that was incredible. We don't, like you said, with an instrument, you practice. With the bike, you don't. Just get on and go.
I think a lot of people think that they do all this riding, they're practicing, but there's definitely very specific things you can do during the ride. Like I always do this thing where I try to keep my line, when I'm on the road bike, because it's easy to drift, and like, especially if you're getting food or you're getting a bottle or you're looking around, it's easy to drift your line. And so I'm always trying to stay, it's just a practice that I do while I'm on the bike. And but certainly a lot of us, though, growing up riding with no training, you learn by people yelling at you. You get in a group ride and somebody says, hold your line, and for a lot of people, that's like their ticket out. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with it.
Especially women.
Yeah.
The first time someone yells at you and says the term like hold your line, which you don't even know what it means.
That's right.
You're gone.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's certainly much better ways to learn than that. So if somebody wanted to get involved with Velo, now you mentioned on the website, it mentions you do co-ed rides also. And I have a good friend of mine, Galen Mundau.
I know Galen.
Yes. And he said, you are a certified badass. So you got that going for you. But I know he's been coached by you. So if somebody's interested in getting coaching, what's the best way to reach out to you? What are the options available?
Well, go to Savvy Bike. So savvybike.com, 2 V's, just in case you can't spell savvy. And the coaching calendar is there. Nothing's up yet for 2024, but soon it will be. Most of the clinics we do are co-ed. And then
Okay.
on the riding side, Velo Girls, most of that is women only. So I made a brand split about 10 years or so ago because I had enough men who wanted coaching and bike fit, and they weren't looking at Velo Girls, but it wasn't a very intuitive place. And more was becoming co-ed of what I did. So Velo Girls, most of what we do is on Meetup now. We have a one-page website and everything goes over to Meetup. So we do some co-ed rides occasionally, usually special occasions like holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas and stuff like that.
So on the coaching side, you do road, gravel, mountain. I saw there's tri and track even that you mentioned. I mean,
we've done a lot of things. I started a women's track series years ago that we don't do anymore, but now I think there's another women's program down at Hellier. We've coached cyclocross and gravel right now because the pandemic kind of shut everything down for a while, especially the dirt oriented stuff. We couldn't get permits to be in the open spaces. So that kind of eliminated the mountain bike, gravel, cyclocross stuff. We'll see if we bring it back. So the good thing is there are other coaches out there in these spaces now too, which is good. They're especially on the mountain bike side. There used to be like Gene Hamilton and Lee Likes Bikes. That was it.
Yeah.
And now there's amazing coaches who far exceed what we do on the mountain bike, I think. So I tend to refer people out. I know my area of expertise.
Okay. So how many opportunities would somebody have to get coached? Once that calendar's up, is it a couple times a week, or is it,
Well, no, on the coaching side, we're doing about 40 clinics a year. Some of them are public. Some of them are for other clubs. So so a lot of people find us through the other clubs that we contract with.
Okay. Yeah, great. All right. Well,
two things you got me thinking about is so I do these group rides we used to do them every Sunday. To your point, I think the pandemic really puts a kibosh on it, so we're back to once a month. But I've never. I have what I call a group, and when I do it, I tend to go with the newbies, and I tend to do as you say, stay back, and so that I could do the coaching. But I've never actually thought about just doing a women's only day as a way of potentially just bringing it out, and then getting one of the women that is very active in this group to maybe come out and just lead it. I've just never thought about it. I've always talked about inclusiveness. This is why we have 5 different groups and different levels, but it never said specifically a women's thing. And you've really got my wheels turning.
Good. There. And I like the idea of when you said get one of the women who is active to come out and do it, because one of the things that I always find a little cringeworthy is when a dude is running a women's program. And I've always made it obviously my priority is promoting women in the sport. And so whenever I've hired a webmaster, if I know a bike racer who's a webmaster, I'm going to give her a gig, or a graphic artist or whatever. I really do think a greater way to empower women is to get a woman, even if you have to train someone to do it, but to get a woman to help lead, to help start that initiative. So I do believe that it's more sustainable if we're able to do it for ourselves. So
I want to be sensitive to time, and I know Mike probably has to pee, but
not true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're on
got a cup under.
Coke.
You can't see with the blur. He's got a cup under his desk. So,
but I saw something, and I think you mentioned it before. We've had Andrew Weber on earlier. And we talked about bike fits because, I'm huge in the bike fitting and always encourage people to do it. But you just touched on something, and I'll bet you the vast majority of people that own them don't do it. I'll bet you nobody I know has ever had a fit on a Peloton.
Yeah.
And as you brought that up, I thought, what a shame.
It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started fitting Peloton in people's homes pre-pandemic back in either 2015 or 16, right about the time they came out. And it was usually clients I would fit in the studio, and a dude, he'd say, "Oh, my wife has this thing in the bedroom, it hurts, she won't ride it, can you come fit her?" And so I started doing that. And then with the pandemic, I wasn't going to go to people's homes anymore. So I bought a Peloton for the studio. And right around the same time, Matt Wilbers, who's one of the Peloton instructors, reached out to me, and I didn't know who he was. I had to Google him, but he's kind of famous. Because I wasn't riding Peloton at the time.
Right.
And I would do indoor training, I would do Zwift. And he's like, oh, I have this coaching business. We're fitting. I've got 5 guys. I was the 6th on staff. And at one point we had 28 fitters.
Wow.
I've done over 3,000 Peloton fits since 2020 virtually.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Woo.
It's crazy. And I am not a tech person. And I was like, oh, that sounds dreadful. I'd never made a Zoom call or a FaceTime or any of those things. And I was like, I'll do 5 a week. How's that? I'm super busy in the studio and I absolutely love it. I will say I have fit people all over the world. And I'm
awesome.
on the West Coast. Everyone else is East Coast. So I get like all the Australians and the Hawaiians and the Alaskans and all the cool people. And it's amazing. Although it is about 85% women, which is interesting. But the cool thing about it, I think, is we're introducing Bike Fit to a whole new audience. And the Peloton really is a gateway drug. I've had an awful lot of people join our programs here in Velo Girls who started out on a Peloton who never rode an outdoor bike. And Matt would say in class, you should get an outdoor bike and ride outside. And they do. It's pretty amazing. In a 45 to 60 minute appointment, we do, they have a pre-fit interview form to fill out, but we do an interview, a physical assessment where I watch them go through a series of movements to assess, weaknesses basically, or any anomalies like leg length discrepancy. It's amazing to me we can see this, but the focus on video is really interesting. And then we adjust their cleats because most of them, their cleats are all over the place, not in a good position. And then we put them on the bike and it's a pretty iterative process, but super successful. So it's lots of people find the bike not to be comfortable. And I find once you get them in a good spot, they're like, wow. And then their power goes up and they're happy and they tell their friends and their social life improves because their saddle doesn't hurt them anymore. And so
that's cool.
It's pretty awesome. It has been super fun. And I find, the mix of that, I do about 20 of those a week. And then I fit in the studio 1 or 2 days a week. And it's super fun to do both. So,
yeah.
Well,
you got a lot
and I'm
of
like
layers.
Andrew. I listened to Andrew's podcast with you guys. And I'm like him. I'm very old school. I can use all the tools out there. I've been trained in pretty much every methodology. But at the end of the day, it's about communication and it's about seeing. I feel like if I'm spending more time looking at a computer than looking at my client, I'm probably not serving them very well. So, yeah.
Well, okay. So you brought up Andrew Weber. So what's your take on the short cranks?
I've never ridden 145s. I have been, and it's interesting because I have a super long inseam. I'm 5'10", which led itself to some very interesting bike choices early in my career because, well, how we used to fit bikes, stand over it. And if you have an inch, but my torso is super short and most women of European descent, they are, as well as their forearms. So reach was always a challenge. And I was at, 44 centimeter handlebars. I ride 36, super big frames. And I switched everything to 160s recently.
Okay. Yep.
So I've been going, I have hip issues and I have congenital FAI and torn labrum on both sides. And I've had 1 hip surgery and being in a position with the shorter cranks definitely has improved my power. A matter of fact, so much so that this past year, I had hip surgery in 2017 and I went to shorter cranks. This past year, I PR'd Hamilton, Montebello, the first 3 passes of the death ride before it got 120 degrees out or whatever it was.
Wow.
Just everything I rode. And granted, I had really good training this year too, but all those PRs have been set in 2015. So that was pretty significant, I think. I was just able to climb with less impingement at the hip and more comfort and better pedal stroke and more power production. And so I agree.
Let me follow up question. 2015 fitness level. Would you say your fitness level of 2015 is I mean, obviously you were younger then, but would you say it's comparable?
Pre-menopause.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I'm 20 pounds heavier than I was at race weight.
Oh, wow.
And so,
So 2015, you're 20 pounds
and I'm
heavier.
faster.
Okay. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
there he goes. He's right now. He's online. He's ordering the shorter cranks.
Yeah.
There he goes.
Well, shorter cranks are part of it. I think I mean, this could be a whole nother podcast. There's a lot of things that have happened in my life. I got sober 12 years ago. That totally changed my fitness.
Huge.
Yeah, because it makes
Don't go there, Mike. Don't go there, Mike.
That's huge, Dave. It's huge.
It is.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay.
But I think I never reached my potential in my early years of riding because I drank,
It's one of the things we do to sabotage ourselves. We sabotage ourselves all the time, whether it be diet, alcohol, whatever, sleep.
Right.
It's all kinds of things we do.
The biggest change, though, was I didn't have consistency. Right. So once I stopped drinking, then I became very consistent. Then I had a good run of, because that was 2011. 12?
Okay.
Now I don't remember. I know it's going to be 12 years next year. Do the math. 2012. And having all of those consistent years, even with a few surgeries and things in there, and gives you a different perspective, right? Better sleep, better nutrition, better everything. So, and it's interesting because, the whole topic of women and women aging is very popular right now. And I think that's great. We're actually talking about it. The fact that we're not done at 50, our warranty ran out, but we're not done.
Yeah.
And that we still can be Doreen, I know Doreen, she's a badass at 50 something. Yeah. I know. Yeah. So,
it's only a number. I think the whole age paradigm is shifting for everybody. When I was younger, you look at people that were in their 50s when we were in our
they were teens, old.
They were really old. And
I will disagree. Melanie said something about you in her interview with you. Yeah. She was saying, I think you can keep doing it forever. Well, a few people can, like Linda Jackson, but she was genetically gifted. I think until you are here at this point in life, you don't realize how challenging it is, that you have to be precise. I have to put in really quality time. I have to get really quality recovery. Those are the two big things. I can't just go out and ride 20 hours with no thought to it. I have to think about how I'm going to do these things, and I have to ramp up gradually. And so it's definitely different. And we know that there's a huge performance drop for women in their 50s. Men kind of starts at about 45, actually. You start to see things change. So,
if you only knew in your 20s what you know now about how to get the best performance out of your body. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well,
I thank you for that, because I'm tired of beating myself up. I mean, I just, every time I look in it, there's
head wound notwithstanding.
What's that?
Head wound notwithstanding.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
All right. Hey, listen, I'm sorry. We could keep going here, and I know I have a conference call I got to get on at 9:00, so I got to wrap it up. But Lori, it's been great, and like to your point, I think we could do another one of these things and cover short cranks or
actually
whatever
talk
else.
About women.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But
well, I appreciate the opportunity. I reached out to you when I didn't know about your podcast, and I reached out and I said, "You don't have any women on there. What's that about?" And he's like, "Well, come on." Yeah, I know. So I think the bike industry is a great place for women, and whether it's as a participant in riding bikes but I think we have to do the work to encourage them to get involved, whether it's working in the industry or just participating in the sport. And I think it improves their lives so much. I want to share that with the other part of the population that doesn't participate. Yeah. So whatever we can do.
Yeah, no doubt. And we applaud your efforts. And we need more women out there like you willing to take it on and encourage others to get out and be a part of it. Okay, so Savvy Bike with double V. That's why I want to say Savvy. Although I was a big Pirates of the Caribbean fan, so Savvy. But whatever that's worth. Okay, so if you're interested in getting coached up, you want to get a good quality fit, you got a Peloton bike at home. Not happy with, reach out to Savvy Bike, talk to our friend Lori here. She'll get you set up. Thanks so much for joining us. I do have some business I need to take care of on the end. Go ahead, Dave. What do you got?
Well, no, but she's also all that is on Instagram. You can find her all on Instagram and Facebook. So
Yes.
Yeah, somebody followed me today.
I did. Yeah. I already follow you on Facebook.
I was like, and I'm really sad I don't do a lot on social media anymore.
yeah,
but
yeah,
I do a lot in real life.
Yeah, that's right. Live in the real world.
You did have a good quote though. I don't know if you stole it. I know Mike's got to go to his meeting, but I took a picture of it. I'm going to use this. It's very hard. It's very hard to then take a step back and say I'm a beginner, but I try to help people understand that it's actually really cool. When I'm a beginner, every time I ride my bike, I can improve. I don't know if you made that up or stole that, but it's freaking good. So
it is
stuff.
It's
Bye.
Yeah. It's that beginner mindset we should all keep in mind.
It is.
All right. So if you first, hey, we got a new subscriber. So that's big news. Yep. So John Dunbar, we want to say a big shout out to John Dunbar. Thank you for subscribing. You're going on the Cycle Jerks Hall of Fame wall. So thank you very much. And if you're interested, you like what we do here, you want to follow along, you can go to cyclejerkspodcast.buzzsprout.com and hit the subscribe button. And if you don't want to do that, but you still like what we do, you want to give us a 5-star review, that helps us with the internet people. And but Lori, thanks so much. We appreciate you. And we'd love to have you back on maybe after the first year sometime. Yeah.
Cool. It was beyond great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Later.